Welcome back, Ultimate fans, to another edition of the AUDL Take. Thanks again for tuning in. Like always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Today we got a lot of exciting news going on in the AUDL, but of course we're starting our first segment off with more signings. There's so many signings going on, and I really want to talk about 3 players specifically in this episode. But before we jump into that, I really want to mention that there are so many other players out there in the league being signed by so many teams. It's hard for me to really keep track of all of them and talk about all of them on this show. So if you want to learn more about other players and other teams that are making some huge signings, check out the AUDL.com, check out AUDL social media all over the place. They're talking about it. So many great writers and people behind the scenes talking about all these different players. Moving on to our first segment, we've got more signings. And this time it's coming from Dallas and New York. And we're going to focus mostly on Dallas. They have 2 big signings that we've seen over the past week. The first one coming from Chase Cunningham. Moving from Austin, joining Hankey. This team's really bolstering themselves up. They're a little hurt about losing in the finals against New York, and they're trying to build that 2016 team. A lot of high-skilled players all coming together to really just run this league over. To add upon that, we have Abe Kaufman. Abe's just an incredible player. He is that offensive quarterback for that team. And I think Abe's just been able to fill that role and just in a lot of ways just bring even more talent to that team. He's consistent. He's going to score against you. He's going to get assists. He's all over the field. He moves the disc forward. He does what he has to do to get that team to score. Now adding with Cunningham and Abe, Hankey, Kirk Gibson, there's just so many great players there. I could go on and on and on that list. It's just I could name all the best players in Ultimate, and they're playing on Dallas right now. Like I said, in the West, they're going to probably dominate. And I really think with these 2 signings, they're showing that the West Division isn't just what they want to win. They want to win the AUDL Championship more than anything else. And they've been so close for the last few years. I think it's about time. Our other big signing story is coming from New York. Once again, this team, I think they're making a quality run for another championship. With the signing of the AUDL MVP Ben Yacht has now confirmed he's playing for New York again. I believe this is his 4th season there now. He revolutionized that whole offense. As soon as he really stepped up into his prime, he's really grown over the last 2 years, and his throws have gotten better. So he used to just kind of be that deep threat, or he would get open and get those big scores, but he's starting to be able to throw them deep as well. He's always been a great thrower, but you're starting to see it become more and more consistent. Having that AUDL MVP under his belt, getting a championship, I'm curious to see how he enters this season. Is he going to even be better than he was before? Is he going to kind of stagnate, or is he going to drop? He's going to be an interesting guy to watch throughout this entire season. I believe New York having him as they continue to bring more and more of their players back from last year. Yes, Dallas is building up a great team, but New York's doing the same. And right now, the style of New York seems to work really well on the AUDL field. The Dallas team is a very gritty, tough. They push through and they score and they just beat you all 4 quarters. New York seems to have this kind of nonchalant style about them. They're tough, they're gritty, but they're just beautifully crafted offenses that just work well against that kind of Dallas defense that tries to just force you into mistakes, kind of bullying you into throwing away turns. Curious to see now how New York keeps the signings up, but a big one for them and making that big mark in their offseason, showing that New York is very interested and looking like they are very capable of winning another AUDL championship. Moving on to our next segment, it's part 3 of the part 4 series of who I think is going to win in each division and possibly go to AUDL championship weekend. We're now on to the East, and this is probably going to be the easiest predictions for me as far as all the other divisions. Probably the East and the West are the most predictable to me. Let's jump right into the East. We got, starting at the bottom, we're going to move to the top. We have Ottawa Outlaws, I believe, going to be on the bottom of this division once again this year. They kind of remind me of the Detroit Mechanics from the Central Division, but they've never really seemed to build anything up each year. Ottawa is a little bit different than Detroit. Ottawa comes away with a few wins each year, and they play competitively against some of the top teams in that division from time to time. But overall, putting a whole season together, they've yet to really make that jump to that playoff kind of contender. They're there, they could upset you at any point. Putting a whole season together has really been difficult for them, and really getting major signings each year. As far as you look at like their social media and their off-season kind of output, you really don't hear a lot about them, and then all of a sudden they're there in the season and they have some great games. For them to focus this year, come away with a lot of wins, hopefully get those upsets, really focus on this year of really developing some raw talent and hopefully moving on through the next season, trying to work better on the offseason and bring in some more people from maybe different towns, or really hopefully develop that youth there so that they could become a serious contender in the next few years. I don't see this year being much different than what they've had previously. There might be a few upsets. I'll be curious to see how they match up against Boston. Once again, I'm going to put Ottawa down at the bottom, finishing 5th place this year. Now for the 4th place position, this is going to be a tricky one. Montreal Royal there. This team can beat anybody in this division. And they have done very well for the last few years. They've had their chances. They've been very close over and over again of really being a dominant team in that division. They got some great players coming in and playing for that team. I'm curious to see how they'll match up against Boston. That's going to be a real hard part about this division, where Boston really lies. I just feel like they're going to put up a pretty solid team, but I think Montreal is going to fall short of them and finish in the 4th position. Now moving on to our 3rd position, we do have the Boston Glory. Are they going to be the team like New York and Dallas who've just kind of built a dynasty and then just boom, are going to explode all of a sudden? I don't see that happening. I think there's a lot of great players in Boston. I just don't think a lot of those players are going to make the jump to the AUDL. Now I've seen someone like Tanner Johnson come in. He's going to be a quality player, and I think there's going to be a lot of standout players, and there's going to be a few upsets that Boston puts on. As far as them getting into the playoffs first year coming into the AUDL, I just don't see that happening. I think it actually was easier for teams back in 2015, 2016, when the league was still expanding so quick. The teams that were there before were only in the AUDL for a couple of years. Now we're entering our 9th year. Some of these teams have been around for 7 or 9 years. So now to see Boston come in, a lot of these other teams, a lot of these other players have had a lot of experience playing in the AUDL, that larger field, the game clock, the refs. There's a lot going on now that you don't see in club. Curious to see if some other AUDL players come and play for Boston. That will give them an edge. Year 1 coming into the AUDL, especially with New York being as powerful as they are, and I think Toronto feeling like they should be back on top, Boston's going to fall right into that 3rd place position. I don't see them getting to the playoffs this year, but I think they'll be pretty darn close, and they'll finish out in the top 3. We've got number 2, I'm going to give to the Toronto Rush. It's amazing to see now that Toronto has kind of fallen to 2nd place in this division. They used to just be an easy pick. Toronto, they're going to win it all. They haven't really got any worse. I don't think this team is worse than they have been over the last few years. I just think other teams have finally gotten more developed, brought in more talent, and they're starting to surpass Toronto. I wouldn't even say Toronto's gotten worse or stayed the same. They have gotten better. It's just you're starting to see New York really take hold. Having DC leave was going to give Toronto, I think, a little bit of a break, because you started to see DC also moving up. Now that they're gone, they only have to worry really about Boston and possibly Montreal. Toronto's going to put up a solid year, but New York, I think, is hungry, thirsty. They're ready to get back to championship weekend and get another championship. And I just feel like Toronto, with the great players they have, there just isn't enough to really push them into the first place, but it'll be an exciting game, I think, against New York if them two go to the playoffs. And let's just kind of jump right off and then to number 1. New York Empire is going to win this division this year. I think they looked incredible last year. They played very well. They had a lot of close games. They went undefeated, but there were some that went down to overtime, and some they had some amazing comebacks. So there is a possibility that New York maybe doesn't win some of those games, and that drops them into maybe 2nd place. I don't think so. I think they're going to be even more confident this year. As long as they can keep their confidence in check and play solid ultimate, I really don't see anybody really slowing this team down. I just can't express how amazing of a year they had last year. We all kind of knew something special was going on, and then they went on just a tear through the league, winning every single game. I really didn't predict they would go undefeated. If you watch that championship game against Dallas, you just see a team that, even when it was close, they just felt like they had control. Like I said, if they can keep that confidence, that mentality of play quality, solid ultimate, try not to do anything too flashy, they're going to have a solid run again this year. I think Boston will be enough to kind of change things up. I think Toronto's going to try really hard to knock New York off the first chance they get, and I think New York's going to probably win the division championship during the regular season. So who goes to AUDL championship weekend? Well, it's obviously, to me, going to be between Toronto Rush and the New York Empire. New York mostly going to host that game, and I think it's going to be very entertaining. I think Toronto, they knew they were going to have a tough time against them last year, and they had to do kind of that doubleheader weekend. This year, there's just going to be 2 teams going through, so they're going to have time to prep and really prepare for this game against New York. But in the end, I still think New York's going to get through. There's still a lot more signings to go on. We're still very early, and injuries are always a case in the AUDL that can kind of change a season, especially week by week. I don't see anything really slowing down New York. I think Toronto's going to put up a good fight. It's going to be a close game, but in the end, New York, I'm telling you, I just have a lot of good feelings about this team. I think they're going to make a serious run to go back to back. Really, the only team standing in their way, I think, could be Dallas. One of the most entertaining divisions, especially because Boston's going to be there. Keep an eye on where they end up, and that could really change kind of the dynamics of where these 2 teams, Toronto and New York, will end up. I think if Toronto ends up hosting, the better chance that they will get to AUDL championship weekend. As the way I see it right now, New York just seems to be too strong and too pumped to get another championship. I think if they host and they finish number 1 at the end of the regular season, they are definitely going to AUDL championship weekend, and there's a high probability that they'll get back-to-back championships. On to our final story of this episode, and this is big news, not only just for the AUDL, but Ultimate as a whole. Fox Sports 2 has decided to broadcast each game of the week this season in the AUDL. This is a quality network, Fox. It's Fox Sports. Yes, it's Fox Sports 2, but I don't think we should really get into that nitty-gritty. Yeah, if it was Fox Sports 1, even bigger deal. But we're talking about regular network television. This is something where people are going to be flipping through the channels and they're going to find the sport way more likely than we did see with Stadium, and honestly better than ESPN3. But let's really break it down. Let's kind of start back with, let's say, ESPN3. With ESPN3, that was great. ESPN brand, the AUDL was very proud of, and they had 3 years of a good running. But you have to look at the fan base of the AUDL. A lot of people outside of the United States are huge fans of the AUDL. And with ESPN3, it was only broadcast within the United States, as far as I know. And so you were really limiting that global audience that I think the AUDL really wants to reach to. Because you have to remember, the AUDL mostly focused on people who are not Ultimate fans. They're not trying to appease the Ultimate player to come and watch Ultimate. They're looking to attract the people who aren't fans of Ultimate or don't know about it or think it's not a sport. And all of a sudden you start to see it pop up. That's who the AUDL is targeting. And now going to Fox Sports 2, it's going to really give them a good chance to premiere a wonderful sport and show that it is a sport and that it is worthy of being on mainstream network television. Look at Stadium. That was kind of the break from ESPN3. There was also 11 Sports before that, but Stadium was trying to be that world broadcast to get out there to the most people as possible. I think it was a step in the right direction, and it's what's led to now Fox Sports 2 being a broadcast partner. Now let's kind of break into what exactly is Fox Sports 2 doing. Fox Sports is just broadcasting it. Fulcrum is the company that's going to be filming these games. They've been doing it since the dawn of time as far as I can remember. So they are the crew that's going to be going and doing Game of the Week. It'll still be broadcast live on AUDL.TV, and then the rebroadcast will be Wednesdays at 6 p.m., which is like a primetime slot. It's not a big deal whether it's live or not. Yeah, it's a rerun. It kind of does feel like, man, I would like to see it live on Fox Sports 2. But the fact that it's even being broadcast on there, we're talking about 58 million people have Fox Sports 2. If we can get a fraction of those people, that's going to be a huge step for Ultimate. This is just one of those big moments for the AUDL, but this is really a big moment for Ultimate in general. To finally get on network television, to kind of create that legitimacy. Me as a personal Frisbee player, I don't need the legitimacy, but if we're building a franchise, we're building a league so that future generations of Ultimate players can actually make a living playing the sport and making a living in broadcasting and journalism and everything around the sport, this is the steps we have to take. And now you're starting to see big companies take the risk and take the leap and say, all right, we want to show this sport. What kind of games are going to end up on Fox Sports 2? This is where it gets into the marketing part of it. And this is something I'm very interested in. This is a big chance for the AUDL to market to other sponsors. They're going to make sure that they've got a lot of crowd shots. They're going to go to the games and to the fan bases and the franchises that have that huge fan base and going to be able to put on a quality production. Those are going to be the teams that you see on Fox Sports 2. Regardless, it's going to be an incredible year. What kind of people are we going to draw in? How many people outside of Ultimate are going to start tuning in? In this decade of Ultimate, I think this is the decade for the AUDL. If nothing happens in these next 10 years and we just kind of stay flat, I'll be a little disappointed because I think in the next 5 years, especially how this year goes, could be a huge leap as far as Ultimate and the AUDL. It's going to be an incredible time to watch this sport grow, and I'm so glad I'm being a part of it as just in broadcasting and filming it. It's going to be an incredible year, incredible decade. Make sure you tune into Fox Sports 2. This is going to then bleed kind of into the USAU. You're going to start seeing other big networks move to that as well. It's a good thing for Ultimate as a whole. That's going to wrap up this episode of the AUDL Take. Thanks again for tuning in. If you made it through the whole video and you haven't hit the like or subscribe button, it'd be awesome if you did. Once again, thanks again for tuning into the AUDL Take, and I will see you all next week.